My name is Matt Dillon. I was the S3 of the 1st of the 7th Cav during this battle 60 years ago in Vietnam. But before we get into that, I'd like to just give you a little background. We were formed at Fort Benning, Georgia as a test unit. The concept was changing from ground infantry riding on deuce-and-a-half trucks to infantry flying in helicopters, and we would have spent a couple years testing it. And apparently it must work, because sooner or later we were told by President Johnson that he was going to send us to Vietnam. In a famous quote on 28 July, he said, "Today I have ordered the Air Cavalry to Vietnam." And I looked around the room and I said, "Is there another one?" No, so it was going to be us. But anyway, we spent then about 3 weeks getting ready to go to deploy. And the first question everybody got was, "Do you have a will?" And so we spent a lot of time doing that. And then they said, "All right, you're ready to go to Vietnam." Well, I remember Vietnam on the map was west. They said, "You guys are going to go east." We went to Charleston, South Carolina, and we got on an Army transport named the Maurice Rose, later referred to as the Rambling Rose, because we went all over the Pacific trying to dodge a typhoon. But we went down the East Coast, through the Panama Canal, and then up to Los Angeles, where the ship had to be refueled, and they brought on new food supplies, and all of the officers went off and put more booze in their canteens so we'd have something to drink the rest of the way. It was spent 20 days going across the Pacific. About halfway across, Colonel Brown, the brigade commander and the senior man on the ship, said, "Matt, I want you to put a first cav patch on the funnel of the ship." And I said, "Okay, does the captain approve this?" He said, "Oh, we're not going to tell the captain." I said, "Oh, God, that means we'll be up there after dark, 0:30, trying to paint this patch on the cap." And unfortunately, we don't have a slide that shows that, but we did get it done. It was kind of hairy, swinging on rappel ropes from this thing, because I didn't know it, but ships not only go up and down over the waves, but they swing back and forth. And you're hanging on the end of this rope, and it swings out over the edge of the boat, and about 100 feet down is the ocean. And you're saying, "Oh, are they going to come and get us if we fall?" No, probably not. Well, anyway, we went across, and we landed at Quy Nhon, which is about in the middle of Vietnam. We could have shown you on the map. But the purpose of that was to allow us to move easily to An Khê, which was located right almost in the exact center of Vietnam. And the reason behind all of that was, go back a little in history, the North Vietnamese had planned to attack the South and reunify the country. And they were going to do this by attacking into the Pleiku area. Once they took Pleiku, they would regroup and then go down Highway 19, which was referred by Bernard Fall as the Highway Without Joy. It's where the last big battle of the French before Dien Bien Phu. They lost a complete regiment on that highway right in the vicinity of An Khê. So I think that's one of the reasons why they selected An Khê for our headquarters. After they'd gotten through An Khê, they would have gone to Quy Nhon, and then they would have made two attacks, one from the west, Cambodia, into Saigon, and the other down the coastline. So we were there to stop all of that. And we arrived there, and the first thing we had to do was build this huge camp, because we had 434 helicopters. And you have to have a space between all. Anyway, it took up many acres, and we spent a lot of time cutting down bushes and everything, and then erecting tents for us. And that took usually about the first month or so. And then we started doing small unit combat around that vicinity. Finally, we did one long battalion thing up Happy Valley, which was the next valley to the east of Ankh. And that worked out. We did pretty good on that. And when we came back on the 9th of November, we got the orders to move our brigade, which consisted of the 1st and 2nd of the 7th Cavalry, to a Pleiku area. We landed by helicopter at a base called Contec, which was a French tea plantation. Had a beautiful runway there built by the French, and a white stucco house in the middle of this place with a swimming pool. And well, of course, we weren't allowed to use a swimming pool, but the French were paying big money to both sides to keep running that tea plantation. First thing we did was run company-size attacks to the east of the Plamy Special Forces camp. And most of us in our hierarchy couldn't understand why they give us a mission to go to the east. God damn it. Sorry about that. It's nice to know that somebody still calls me. Well, anyway, we spent a couple days doing that, and finally we had a meeting with General Knowles, the Assistant Division Commander, Colonel Brown, myself, Colonel Moore, and the Sergeant Major, and we said, you know, we're just wasting the troops' time, and we're wearing them out, beating the bushes and not finding any targets. I think we ought to go to the west. And some of the Special Forces officers at the Plamy camp had told us after their attack that all of the NVA went west. And the Cambodian border was only a few, about 10 miles from where we were currently. So they said, okay, on the 14th, we will attack from here by helicopter into a landing zone that we had picked out that I named X-ray, which is kind of unique because the North Vietnamese had that spot designated as X-ray also. But anyway, the plan was that B Company would go first. They had 16 helicopters, 8 could land at one time, and then A, then C, then D, and then whatever stragglers we had left. We were going to plan on leaving on 10:30 in the morning. That was going to be the H hour. As it turned out, the artillery was a little bit late setting up for the prep, so we didn't actually leave it on time. My role in all of that was to fly above the lift ships at 2,000 feet, and when they were firing the prep, Bruce Crandall, the lift commander, would call me when they were 1 minute out, and then I had a ceasefire on all the artillery so that the lift ships could land without any rounds going off underneath them. And that was followed up by the aerial rocket artillery who would fire into the right and left of the helicopter while they were landing. And then the lifts people had 4 gunships, and they were trailing along, and they were firing into right and left of where they. So at 10:48, we put the first troops on the ground. They were looking and staring up at Chupang Mountain, which is about 2,000 feet tall, and they could look down on the LZ and see us landing. And one of the sergeants in B Company, Sergeant Gilreth, captured an NVA prisoner. He said he was an AWOL, but he really was probably a lookout for the thing. He told us through an interpreter that there were 4 regiments on Chupang Mountain. And so he started calculating, well, 4 regiments. I go, Jesus, this is going to be about 3,600 bad guys. And about that time, A Company came in, and Moore had the 2 companies, instead of checking out the surrounding land around X-ray, had them immediately start into the foothills of Chupang to prevent anybody, any of the bad guys from coming into the LZ. That was going to be our lifeblood, continuous helicopter supports. And by the midday, the LZ was under fire. Actually, some of our soldiers were killed on the helicopters landing. And one of our company commanders, Ray LaFay of D Company, was actually wounded on the helicopter before it landed. So the battle, I think that the NVA messed up. They had 4 regiments. They should have waited until all 4 were there. They were separated until they were all 4 in a position to attack at one time. They probably could have given us a hard time, a really hard time. But they were piecemealing forces into us. So it started out with squads making attacks on, and then they progressed up to platoons, and then there were company-sized attacks. And by the end of the day, there were remnants of battalions making attacks on the LZ. It was during this time that Lieutenant Herrick's platoon got separated. And the NVA put enough troops between us and that platoon that we could not go after them and rescue them. We tried it once and took too many casualties, so we had to call Ernie S. Savage, who was now in charge, and tell him, we won't be able to get you till tomorrow. So they were going to spend a tough night with squad-sized NVA people attacking them, sometimes just walking right into the little perimeter that they had. But they had 13 dead and 9 wounded, and they kept them alive. All the wounded survived. All the rest of the platoon survived that night of the attack. So they were ready. When we found them in the morning, they were ready to be brought back into the LZ. The first day's attack was started building up and getting things. And during the time we were there, we had 2 things that the enemy didn't have. We had 2 artillery batteries that fired thousands of rounds in both days. And we had the Air Force. And in those 2 days, we had 70 TAC air sorties, 35 each day. And that's 4 planes per sortie. And additionally, we had some A-1Es, which was a propeller-driven fighter plane from World War II, to support us. Bad guys didn't have that, and it cost them. And I can remember seeing, looked like 100 people coming across an area, and 4 F-4s came over and dropped napalm on them, killed every one of them. So I'm going to be followed now by Bob Edwards, who was the C Company commander and who was involved in probably the biggest fights in the first 2 days. Bob?
I take a different approach to things. Number one, as you see, I walk around when I talk, and that's one of the things that the infantry school frowns upon for instructors. You can't walk up to the edge of the platform, everybody thinks you can step off. Well, screw it. I'm going to do things my way. I had the best call sign, I think, in the battalion and maybe in the division. I was Hot Wire 6. And if you see me tonight at the bar, you can call me Hot Wire 6. I was the 3rd company in. A and B Company had stirred up the enemy to the point that when we approached, the helicopters went to about 4 feet hover, and we jumped off. That was not unusual because we trained at Fort Benning to do that. Again, and I was fortunate, I had most of the company with me. Moore grabbed me, and this is at maybe 1400 in the afternoon. He said, forget what the plan was, you take C Company, and now off the LZ and block. I was fortunate, had platoon leaders, most of the company. I gave them a quick order. We dashed off the LZ into the shrubs on the edge of the LZ. I put 3 platoons on line, 2, 1, and 3. We had maybe 20 minutes to dig very shallow foxholes when the enemy struck in force, probably battalion size. They thought they had found an open area. Their ass was wrong. We were down in very shallow holes. We had pretty good fields of fire compared to what A and B Company were experiencing as they were trying to get to Ernie Savage. So we stopped them cold. And in the book, Moore says, C Company defeated the most serious threat of the day. After a half an hour or so, they withdrew. I could get up and move around. My situation was I had a gap on the right, and I had nothing on my left. Matt has told you that the D Company commander was wounded, and his executive officer or platoon leader was wounded. They were down to a sergeant. I found that sergeant, and Moore gave me his permission to put them on my left flank. So I had a little more protection on the left flank. Later in the day, we got a reinforcing company, B Company, 2nd of the 7th. When they arrived, they filled in a gap over by A and B Company, and Moore gave me a 4th platoon to fill my gap where I tied in with A Company. We finally had a 360 perimeter that we could defend for the night. It's kind of a quiet night. The story goes that there was somebody in A or B Company that were occasionally firing M79 round out there until Matt got a hold of him and said, the next son of a bitch that fires an M79, I'm going to eat his ass. Remember that, Matt?
Yes.
All right. Monday morning, Moore gets on the radio, says 2 things. I want you company commanders, after you send out patrols to find out what's in front of you, I want you to meet me at the C Company command post, and we're going to go find a way to get Ernie Savage and his platoon back. Each of my now 4 platoons sent very small patrols, each led by the platoon leader, lieutenants. They didn't get far until the whole front erupted. Another bigger attack by the enemy at my area. I got on the radio, called the platoon leaders. 2 of them answered and said, we're back in position. Well, that helped for 50% of the company. The other 2 platoon leaders didn't answer. And I figured the worst, and the worst was they had both been killed, and most of their men had not been back. The enemy closed to the point where I could not use artillery in a defense, and it became a 2.5-hour man-to-man fight for that area. I lost most of the company, but the enemy did not penetrate our lines. When it all came down and they withdrew, Moore took what was left of my company. I had been wounded. I had 2 lieutenants killed. I had 2 lieutenants wounded. What was left was led by the 1st sergeant. Moore put him back with maybe 50, 60 men left as battalion reserve, and put a company from the 2nd of the 7th in my position. Those guys had a day to dig proper foxholes so that when the next night arrived, which was Monday night, they were ready, and sure enough, the enemy came again, but B Company, 2nd of the 7th, mowed them down. What do I want to talk about now? I'm going to jump now to not telling more stories and tell you guys some things, guys and girls, to do when you get to a new unit. And tell me when to sit down, Matt. We only have 11 minutes left?
Yes.
Oh, man, I could talk for hours. I'll tell you what, find me tonight at the bar, and I will tell you things that a new lieutenant should and should not do when he joins his unit. gonna stand up?
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
I'm George Forrest, and I always hate to follow Bob because he stands up, so that makes me look like an old guy sitting down. So, unlike these guys, I was in the 5th Cav. These guys were all in the 7th Cav, so I was attached. The second day of the Battle of the Drang, we walked into LZ X-ray. Now, I'm naive, ROTC guy. I thought I joined the helicopter unit to fly helicopters, to be in helicopters, to be carried around by helicopters. But I walked in. We were there for 2 nights. On the 3rd day, we received an order that we were going to evacuate that LZ because they were putting B-52 strikes on. I thought I was going to get a ride out. Being attached is like being a redheaded stepchild in a blonde family. So we walked out in a column. At that time, I was attached again to the 2nd of the 7th. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the commander of the 2nd of the 7th called all of the company commanders forward for a briefing because we were going to occupy another LZ called Albany. So I have the distinct pleasure of fighting on Albany and X-ray. On the way up, he called all the commanders forward. I was separated from my unit, went up with my 2 radio operators. When I got to the head of the column where I could see the LZ, the ambush was sprung. The only safe place for me on this battlefield was to get back to my unit. So along with my 2 radio operators, I tried to get back to my unit, which was about 600 meters back down the trail. Lost both of my radio operators. They were killed while we were running back. I got to my unit. We organized, survived the night, and I'm standing here because of guys like Torres, who was my medic. I lost 17 guys, had 47 wounded, and 1 MIA. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Bud Alley. I was a 2nd lieutenant. I was ROTC, and I was part of a new program that the Army tried out in 1964. They said, Alley, you're in the infantry, and you don't need any more training, so you're going to be a platoon leader. So I joined the 2nd Infantry Division at Fort Benning, Georgia as a platoon leader. And from some of you ROTC gentlemen and ladies know that you don't wear bars and railroad tracks. You got diamonds and circles as your rank. And so when I reported in for my assignment, I was not really aware, or I didn't pay that much attention that the rank goes on the right, not on the left. So I reported in to the commanding general with my rank on the wrong side. And that was my introduction to the Army on active duty. And I promptly felt I might end up in the brig somewhere and never get out. I was a staff officer. I was selected as a staff officer for the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cav. In the battle at LZ X-ray, they were having communication problems. And our unit was reinforcing, going in piecemeal. And I volunteered to go and take a 292 radio antenna into there, and not knowing what else would happen as a 2nd lieutenant in the infantry, that was how I got there. We couldn't fly in, we walked in. So the night before we got there, I didn't sleep. The night that we got there, the battle was winding down, but we got into position. In the meantime, our unit, being a new unit, sent a whole bunch of headquarters people out there, like with me, that were not organized in any sort of fighting
positions or familiar with what we were going to do. They were clerks, bottle washers, cooks, truck drivers. And we had our two of our line companies out there along with Captain Forrest. So I didn't sleep again that night. The temperature was about 100 degrees that day. We get the word about 9 o'clock. You're going to move from point A to point B, and it's only 3 clicks, but we got a special route for you. You're going 7 clicks through the jungle. We've got a brand new CEO, brand new management team in place. And I'm the second lieutenant. There's stuff left on the battlefield. So I asked my captain, headquarters captain, Dan Boone, famous name, Dan, what are we supposed to do? He said, well, we're supposed to carry all this extra stuff that's left on the battlefield, all the ammo and extra stuff. So just get what you can and just follow the guy in front. Now we're going to move in a column of 2, and we're going to be about 100 meters apart in the jungle. But just follow the guy in front of you. You'll be fine. What if we run into any enemy? Oh, the Indians have all gone. They lost the battle here at X-Ray. They went home. Well, that was almost right. So we're plodding along through the jungle, following the guy in front. I'm carrying a radio antenna. And what Dan had told me was when you do if you hit anything, just move forward. Just move forward. They'll take care of you. The line companies will take care of you. Well, when the shooting finally started, it didn't exactly work out that way. Very soon, the headquarters lead elements were up front cut off. George was cut off from back in the back, and I found myself in the middle of the killing zone with a gaggle of headquarters people and Charlie Company people. So there I was, 23 years old, not trained in the infantry, no tactics, no way to get in touch with anybody, all by myself. Every time I get 2 or 3 guys together and we're trying to fight our way out, they get killed. So bang, bang, I'm by myself again. Finally, about 6 o'clock that evening, back where we are in this killing zone, the enemy is walking around hollering, they'd say water, and of course we had no water, and the GIs would say, oh, and they'd go over and bang, they were executing the wounded. So I'm crawling around trying to find somebody in there. And I find a fellow I know, 1 Spec 4. He's wounded badly, he can't move, I can't move him, I have nothing to do for him. All I can do is stay there with him and hold him while he dies. I'm 23 years old. I'm 10,000 miles away from home. I am now getting real concerned about me. I want somebody to help me. So I move away from him and I fall into a little ditch. And I fall right on top of 5 wounded GIs that I do not know. And they look at me and they say, Lieutenant, you got to save us. And it's almost dark. The fighting is still going on. And I went, I had no idea how in the world what I'm supposed to do when I hear the artillery firing from about 2 miles away. So the only thing I figured we could do if these guys could move, I would try to get them back to the artillery position. So over the course of the next 8 or 10 hours, we were able to manage to escape and evade through the enemy, back through the jungle with no compass, no water, and I got them all in the next morning at the landing zone. So my point to you is this. When you find yourself in one of these things, one of these situations that you don't know, what in the world can you rely on? It's that moral compass. You know what's right. It's the character that you're building. It's the character that you young men and women are building now as you're learning to be leaders. And that's when you get down to the whole nuts and bolts, it's the character that you've built. It helps you make those decisions, the hard decisions, the decisions you really don't want to make. But it guides you, your moral compass that you're building. So good luck to you as you continue your studies, and good luck as you move into your leadership positions. Thank you.
I'd like to sum it up for everybody. The 1st of the 7th lost 71 soldiers killed, 121 wounded. The second of the seventh lost 155 killed and 121 wounded. There were 3 Medal of Honors, 2 pilots who came in under fire, taking out the wounded for 2 days, Bruce Crandall and Ed Freeman, and one of our infantry lieutenants, Lieutenant Joe Marm, was also awarded the Medal of Honor. There was 4 Distinguished Service Crosses, 17 Silver Stars, and the like amount in the, as you all probably know, the 7th Cavalry was commanded by General George Armstrong Custer at the Battle of Lughorn. We just recently were told that they discovered, and through history and a lot of interviews, that George Armstrong Custer was the first man buried in an arrow shirt. Thank you.
Can I say one important thing? If you saw the movie, you wasted your money. If you want to learn the proper way, the do's and don'ts of small unit fighting and how to lead, read the book.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your service and thank you for being with us here today. I'm Jack Newcomb from the Naval Academy, and my great uncle, Walter Niemeyer, who went by Poochie, he served with you gentlemen in the battle. He ended up losing his leg after throwing it on a grenade that had fallen. And if you gentlemen could elaborate what it was like to lead and serve beside men that would sacrifice themselves and their bodies for those around them, could you just please elaborate on what that was like to lead men like that?
I got the basis of the question is?
How do you feel about fighting alongside others that would sacrifice their own life for yours, or their body for yours?
Well, that's the toughest question I've heard.
Well, let me try.
Okay.
You have this guilt feeling, and I think most company commanders have this feeling of how do you survive. I use as an example my 2 radio operators who were my shadow. I didn't have to look for them. They were always there. But on my attempts to get back to my unit, I assumed that they were still with me. They were killed, and so the question that the demons that have always haunted me is, why them, not me? These were young 18, 19-year-old guys like you, most of you in this room. I'm 88, I'll be 89 on my birthday. And I'm wondering if I'm one of God's chosen ones that he allowed me to survive. An incident happened after I retired. I was an avid bike rider. And one day I was out riding my bike and I was hit by a car. And I'm laying there in the street, and this flashback, I survived 2 tours in Vietnam, and this is the way I'm gonna go out.
George gave me an opportunity to dwell on that really tough question. When you lose a soldier or soldiers, you have to grieve and you have to mourn. But more importantly, you have to remain in control of those that are still surviving and do what you can to make them an effective fighting force.
One more question in the back.
My name is Cadet Kyle Schlomer from Bowling Green State University, the Ohio one, not Kentucky. In your opinion, how effective is aerosol for warfighting, and do you think it's an underutilized asset in today's Army?
Do you believe that aerosol is an underutilized asset in this day and time?
No.
You're the operations guy, Matt.
Do you believe that aerosol is an underutilized asset?
Well, in Vietnam, it was used by everybody. But in a war, as an example, in Europe, where it's mostly armor and everything, it'd be more difficult to fly helicopters and use them in that type of environment because of the anti-aircraft gun and the current missiles that you'd be shooting down whole units at a time. So it probably is not feasible for now. And I think Department of Army had in the back of their mind the whole time in the 60s that they were going to use the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam. There's no roads to speak of in most of Vietnam. So using the helicopters just was something that we had to do. In a place like Europe, where there's a great road networks and everything, you would use tanks and mechs. Asia now is the same way. So probably wouldn't use helicopters like we did in Vietnam.
Yeah,
George?
the use of helicopters, first of all, is you have to establish air superiority. And in convention, in the wars that you guys will hopefully not involve, will depend on your knowledge of cyber, drones. That's the war of the future. There are not going to be any more beach assault landings like in World War II. There are not going to be any more helicopter insertions unless you establish air superiority.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you all be able to stay a little while later today so these cadets and mids?
No,
can-
absolutely.
We can hang around in that.
Stop us any place. We'll be glad to talk to you.
We love an audience.
Ella, tonight, just buy me a drink and I'll tell you anything.
I had the great pleasure and honor to meet and chat with Hal Moore, who was the battlefield commander at LZX-Ray. And the question that was offered to Hal was advice, of course. What's your guiding principles? What can we carry forward with us? And he boiled it down to three things, or actually one thing. In the battle between your head and your heart, go with your gut. Your head will overthink it. Your heart will pour out for it. But your gut's who you are. That's your training. That's your comrades. That's what really should be your guiding light. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for the survivors of Battle of the Drang.